Councilman Castleberry,
Here.
Councilman Weaver, absent. Councilman Rutledge, Mayor
Here.
Pro Tem Rutledge,
Here.
Councilman Standifer, absent. Councilman McDaniels,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Opening remarks. Basically, welcome everybody. Glad to see a crowd this size. As y'all know, we just had the presidential election and the city council election and mayor election for City of Coffee City. My understanding from, I spent quite a bit of time up here on Saturday during the election, and everything seemed to go great. I mean, the people that worked that, Vicky, Adam, Lorena, they worked their hiney off. They kept everything clean. I was amazed at how they worked. And every time somebody touched something, they were behind them with a rag and cleaning solution. And I just got to say thank you for the way they worked. It was amazing. It's important to me, and I think to all of us, that all the elections go off the way they're supposed to. And no matter what the outcome is, I think Americans as a whole should support them. Okay, now I'm off my soapbox, but it's been last several years have been kind of crazy one way or the other, no matter how you felt. So that's all I'm really going to say on that at this point. I've got some other things down below. At this point, item 4 is consider and act upon consent items 5 and 6. The minutes from the city council meeting of October 13th and the city financials for October 2020. Any questions on that? Any thoughts? Say, just so y'all are aware, Doug is now putting all this information out in our boxes on Friday afternoon. If we pick it up, we can study it and understand it hopefully better. Any questions?
No, I make a motion for the writing from 5 for October the 13th to 20th.
You made a motion to approve the. Okay.
A second.
Okay, we have motion and a second, Doug. All approved?
All right.
Item 7, there was not an EDC meeting held this month because of the vote here in this building, which is where that meeting has been had, and they decided that would be a good time to pass and do it next month. From what I understand, there was not a lot of items on the agenda, so we'll move to number 8, open forum. Did anybody sign up for open forum, Doug?
No, sir.
Okay. Nope, nobody is asked to speak in open forums, so we'll move on down. Our auditor here is here, David over here. Do you have a microphone for him? I can't see through it. Edward's in my way.
Got it.
He's going to give us an update on the completion completed audit for 18-19, that's correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. He's also, when he gets done with that, will be working on 19-20. Okay, 2019 through 2020. It's your floor.
Perfect. Well, I don't usually get to sit down and give a presentation, so I want to thank you for the chair. I suppose that also means I can be a little bit more lengthy, since we're all kind of
No.
comfortable. Had to ask. I do have a lot to cover, so I'll try to jump through it pretty quick. If y'all have questions, please stop me. Please ask those questions. I'm happy to take those as we go. I would like to kind of start off though, just by thanking the city for their time. I know Mayor Pro Tem, I know you came and spent some time with us while we were on site doing the audit. Jim Beggerly's hiding back there. He also gave me a significant amount of time over the phone, and so I appreciate that as well. Also appreciate the city staff, Doug and Selena. They're pretty integral to what the city does, and their support is very helpful, along with the EDC treasurer hiding back there, Sandy, as also an integral part of what happens in the EDC. And all of them were very beneficial and very helpful throughout the audit process, and really just helped that go over very smoothly. So just wanted to take a moment to let you guys know how that went. Also let you know that the staff is very eager to ask questions, which I greatly appreciate. That helps the audit process as it goes. It helps them gain an understanding, whether it's a financial aspect or a compliance aspect as we move forward. And I really appreciate that. So I would encourage them to continue asking those questions. And from there, before really getting into the fun details of the audit report, I know I've given you all a fun book in front of you. We'll go through some of those details, but before we really get into that, I wanted to really point out, the roles and responsibilities of the city secretary. We know they do the records management, they handle the elections, they oversee publications, posting of legal notices, council meetings, agendas, packets, human resources for the city, swearing in of public officials, codification of ordinances. The list goes on and on and on until you get down to some legislative activities. Doug's juggling those hats pretty well. From what we can see in the day-to-day, it's pretty clean in all those respects. At the same time, the municipal court, and I'll be honest with you, you're probably the cleanest municipal court I've looked at in quite some time. It is relatively immaculate. The governance, internal controls that y'all have over the municipal court, it shows the documentation there really supports what they do in their day-to-day. And so it really at this time, I'm really pleased there were no issues, concerns that were pointed out of that, and just happy to report that to you guys. So those are kind of the two overviews before I really jump into the details. One other item that I'm going to kind of cover real quick is a governance letter. I only gave a governance letter to the Mayor Pro Tem, and I'll give another one to Doug for the city's record. Basically, this letter is a required communication under standards, and it's what we call the governance letter. And what this really says is that there were no difficulties encountered with performing the audit engagement. In addition, we didn't have any disagreements with management and accounting practices and those types of things. It also puts the city on notice that I'm unaware of any second opinions from other auditors in respect to the conclusions we came to. And just overall that it was a good audit. Have any questions on that?
Looks good to me.
Perfect.
Thank you.
One of the other things that kind of goes along with the governance letter is related to audit adjustments. We did post some audit adjustments throughout the year. Several of them were made to correct accounts related to year-end accrual balances and capital asset balances for the EDC. We also really noticed through the conversion of the EDC from their basically their check register or spreadsheet, what they were accustomed to, into QuickBooks, which really gave them a full balance sheet and profit and loss statement. That there were some adjustments that were coded there, and I will talk just a little bit more about those. But really, the remaining adjustments were just kind of routine, minor in nature, relates to accruals and cutoff, those types of things.
Good.
Perfect.
Can I interject here?
Yes, sir.
One thing. I worked with our past auditor, and she was good. However, her background was more in auditing schools. David's, we have found, is much more based on cities and a lot of small cities. He advised us of some things that our past auditor had us doing wrong, and we corrected those. So he's been a big help from that standpoint, and they spent over a week out here full time going through stuff and trying to get this done, the audit done now, because I think he'll tell you I kind of pushed him a little bit on that. So, and I really appreciate y'all doing that. So, okay.
Absolutely. So happy to come and help out. So without, I guess, any more kind of restraint, let's kind of jump into this fun book here. I'm going to go through it pretty quick. I'm not going to hit every page, so you're welcome ahead of time. But really, the things I want to cover is going to start over on page 2. And when you open that up, there's not a page number on it, but it's got my letterhead on it. So it says DKG CPA really big at the top. This is the independent auditor's report. You'll see that right underneath the letterhead. And so this just kind of covers everything that we do, from management's responsibilities to the auditor's responsibility. And the second page is where we get into the fun stuff. Right up there at the top is where it says opinions, and it does say page 2 at the top there. But it says, in my opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, business type activities, the aggregate discretely presented component unit, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the city of Coffee City. In essence, this is what we call an unqualified opinion in the audit world. An unqualified opinion is a clean opinion, so is the best opinion that you can have in respect to your financial statements. One thing I will point out, down in this third paragraph on the same page, there was a restatement of the net position for the Coffee City Economic Development Corporation. Essentially what happened is that the EDC was previously reporting on a calendar year versus the concurrent year that the city has with the cutoff at June 30th. And so there's a little bit more background to this, and there's a note disclosure on page 35, so I'm gonna have y'all go ahead and skip all the way over there real quick. So on page 35 at the bottom, you're going to see once again the restatement of that position for the EDC. I'll give you guys a second to get there. I know this is a fun presentation. Y'all been waiting for this all week, right? I'm seeing the smiles. Y'all are a hard crowd.
Isn't the EDC's year the calendar year?
Yes, sir. And so to give you a little bit of background, I actually have a verbal comment related to that I really wanted to cover. And to give you a little bit of background, as we're going through the audit process, we noticed that the EDC had been reporting on the calendar year. So we went back to the historical documents, which were the bylaws for the EDC. And in the bylaws for the EDC, they actually do state that they'll run concurrently with the city. What's also interesting, as we look at those bylaws, the EDC board in August of 2020 actually amended their bylaws, and in those amendments, they suggested that the EDC move to a calendar year. I technically don't consider those effective from an audit perspective. The reason why I don't consider them effective at this point, one, it's 2020, so it's a couple years after this particular fiscal year end. But the other reason is the original bylaws require the city council to approve any changes to the EDC's bylaws before they become effective. As far as I'm aware, though, that approval hasn't occurred. So currently, the EDC's effective fiscal year end runs concurrently with the city. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which is,
It's a June 30th.
July 1st.
Yeah,
July 1st through June
yeah,
30th.
July 1st through June 30th, yes, sir.
Okay.
I do want to take this a step further and just point out that GASB, which is the oversight for governmental entities, they also encourage EDCs to run on the concurrent or same fiscal year as a reporting entity, or the city in this manner. They do say later on in the guidance that it is allowable to have a separate reporting period if it's impractical for the EDC to run the same fiscal year. To be honest, I have a hard time understanding that it's impractical for the EDC to run a different fiscal year. The transactions are limited. We really don't even have a separate employee for the EDC. They're non-complex transactions. And so it really doesn't make sense under the guidance for the EDC to have a separate reporting period than the city.
No argument.
Sir?
I said no argument. I think we had that conversation earlier.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bagley.
David pointed these things out to me also, of course, in our discussion. Two things. Number one, we did not know that when we created the new bylaws and approved them within the EDC, that they had to go to the governing body for approval. We did not know that. We provided them to the city, but we didn't say, hey, you guys need to vote on this and tell us about it, okay? That's our fault.
And when did that happen?
That happened approximately a year ago, a year and a couple of months ago. When I took over, I found that we had some documents that were old and incomplete and outdated. The articles of incorporation, as they're called, the certificate of formation, required that we have a set of bylaws. We remade the bylaws, approved them within ourselves, gave y'all a set, but we didn't say, vote on it, tell us what you think about it, approve them, disapprove them, whatever. We didn't do that. So we were operating on, again, what we considered to be an appropriate fiscal year.
Okay. I mean, that's something that can be,
We're gonna fix that.
okay.
That's easy. That's easy. What we're going to do is, number one, make sure that you have the set of bylaws that we gave you originally. Make sure you have that version to approve. Then from there, we can make amendments to those bylaws.
Right. Well,
One
you'll
of-
be giving those to the next mayor and the next city
Yeah,
council.
yes, sir, I understand. I'm addressing the city council at this time. The other thing is, the outstanding point here has to do with the fiscal year. We will adjust the fiscal year to match the city councils. Whatever fiscal year y'all have, we'll set it up to match, and we will address and make a transition year to make that adjustment.
How long does that take, David?
We did the transition through this audit period, so you're in good shape.
I see
Okay.
that
But, I
amount
mean,
right there, which,
My business originally had a July 1st through June 30th in the air conditioning business, and that's the dumbest fiscal you can have. And we adjusted back to calendar year, but it took us 3 years to make that change of course, that was corporate world, so for the IRS and everything else, it was a painful deal. I remember that very well.
Right, so your IRS reporting can be a separate calendar year, and then your city fiscal year can still be the June 30th, because we still have required filings with the IRS that are due in January. You know, anything related to employees or 1099s, those things are still on a calendar year. But what's nice about it being on the calendar year is that's separate from our fiscal year end and kind of doesn't correspond when we sit down and do an audit.
Yeah.
The majority of cities do either have a June 30th fiscal year end or a September 30th fiscal year end. So
And-
I think you're in a good shape right now.
yeah, and in fact, there's an infinite number of fiscal years, but the two most common are the old federal fiscal year and the newer federal fiscal year, which is the September,
Right.
right.
So,
So we'll,
All right.
whatever y'all, we'll jump in and make one.
all right. Any other comments there on that, David?
No, sir. No, sir. But we should be up to date. Everything was rolled forward, but I just wanted y'all to be aware. And that's also, like I said, in the opinion letter as well, so.
David,
Yes,
as, excuse me, as long as I'm up here, there was one other item, that referred to the EDC.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you wanna address it now, or you wanna wait to catch that in sequence?
We'll catch them.
Okay.
So I think we're in good shape. Perfect. Thank you, Jim. All right, let's jump a little bit, actually through the audit report. I know y'all are probably already excited, that the presentation's most of the way over with. Y'all really are a hard crowd. Let's jump over to page 15. This is gonna be exhibit 1. This is your statement of net position. This is your full accrual balance sheet for both the city and the EDC. What you're gonna see up at the top of this page are the cash and cash equivalents. You can see the city's sitting about $293,000, and the EDC is sitting at $230,000. You'll also notice right under the cash and cash equivalent for the city, there's investments of $112,000. Those are the CDs that the city has. You'll also notice at the bottom of the page, the second line item, your unrestricted net position. The city has $446,000 in unrestricted net position, and the EDC sitting right at $240,000. And I think the takeaway here is to know that y'all are a very healthy cash position. There are very limited liabilities in the middle of the page, about $39,000, and the EDC's got about 500. So you're really limited on your liabilities, and you're very healthy unrestricted fund balances. So with that, as Doug kind of pointed out, that you guys kind of like to know about how much operating cash you have in the big scheme of things. So really the way the city is floating right now, that $293,000 is really about 8 months worth of operating income. So if we didn't bring any more income in, we could operate for another 8 months just off of our cash. If we had to cash in our CDs, that would give us another 3 months. So I think Doug did the math earlier and was pretty on par. So about 11 months worth of operating reserves there. For the EDC only spends about $40,000 a year in the big scheme of things. And what you're really gonna see with their cash balance, that $230,000, they've probably got about 6 years worth of operating reserves. So they're in pretty good shape.
Looks good.
I'm not really gonna cover the next piece of the financial statements. They're really gonna regurgitate kind of what we said, just the healthy cash, healthy fund balances, the governmental funds, which are page 18 and 20. Those really are the modified cash basis, is kind of what we call that. And really that position matches what the city books. So if you were to ask Doug for financial statements at any point in time, they should technically match page 18 and page 20. That's really all I'm gonna point out there. And then you've got a little bit more when it comes to the notes, about pages 23 through 37. Those give a really more in-depth look at the city and their financial state. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna skip way back to the back, page 39. This is where we start getting into the fun stuff. What you're gonna see back here is another letter that's gonna be on my letterhead. And it's gonna be the independent auditor's report on internal control, financial reporting, and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standards. Whew, that's a mouthful. So what really happens in this particular report is this is where we get to talk about a little bit more of the internal controls and compliance of the city. And so there's different levels of what we call deficiencies. And so a just regular deficiency in internal control is really identified down in about the third paragraph, and it outlines the differences between a regular deficiency, a significant deficiency, or a material weakness. I can tell you right now that we do not identify any controls that we think are material to the financial statements at this time. We did identify 2 control deficiencies and then also 2 state compliance issues. Just to kind of point those out really quick to you guys. And so, attached to this letter, there's actually going to be a cover related to the schedule of findings and responses back on page 41 is where these start. And so the first issues that I'm going to point out are really related to state compliance. And the state compliance portion that I'm really pointed at is related to record retention. We had a couple of things that we couldn't locate during the audit for both the city and the EDC. We've talked about those with the city staff. We've basically come to a conclusion of a good game plan, and those are documented here in the report, that the city agrees with those and that they're implementing controls to get that back up to par. The last 2 pages, pages 43 and 44, these are where we're identifying internal control weaknesses. And the reason why we identify internal control weaknesses are areas that either susceptible to fraud, where fraud could occur, or where people could suggest fraud was occurring and we couldn't necessarily say that there isn't. And that's related to really our documentation of what we're doing in our day-to-day. When you look at both the EDC and the city, the administrator, so the city secretary and then the treasurer of the EDC, they both really have access to a lot of information, including the ability to write checks. They have authority, signing authority over the bank accounts. They also, I'll pick on Doug in a second. They also prepare the bank reconciliations, and they also do the bookkeeping. So what's the difference between the city and the EDC is the EDC, she signs the checks. For the city, he doesn't sign the checks. But he's still a signer on the account, so he can do administrative activities at the bank. So if you look at your bank signature cards, Doug's still on that signature card list.
Are you, Doug?
Yeah, the only thing I'm on the signature card list is for the debit card and for the, safe deposit box. The accounts I am not on the signature card for.
Perfect.
And this was 2019, so it's
And
been a
it's
while back.
still, and it's
Things-
still
some
that,
things have changed.
but those two items are, still remain the same.
But regardless, even though being on there, and we've talked about this in greater detail, what's fun when it comes to the bank is the bank is not your internal control. Your internal controls have to be separate from the bank. So what could happen is with Doug really processing everything and no oversight or review, which I know y'all are doing some of that, but you're not documenting that that's happening. What that could look like is that Doug could do things and basically pass it off and no one would be the wiser. There's a lot of documentation when you look at the condition, the way it's set up, the way it kind of walks through. But in the big scheme of things, what we need to do from our side is make sure that we're protecting what Doug is doing in his day-to-day to really support him in his activities. And the same thing on the EDC side. We want to support what they're doing and basically protect them and make sure that they are in a good position to continue doing what they're doing. Does that make sense?
Does to me.
So in saying that, what is your recommendation on how we can go about making sure that
Okay.
things meet our protocol and?
That's a good question. So a lot of times when we sit down and we are just reviewing checks per se, when we review checks, we typically have an invoice, we have a check, we sign the check and we let it go on. One of the best internal controls over that particular process is actually just initialing the invoice, showing that we reviewed it. And that's an okay expense to pay. Because once that check goes out, I really don't know if you saw that invoice or not. And one of the fun things that we look at when we're really digging through invoices, we're looking for those wet signatures or those wet initials. And so it's really hard for Doug at that point to make copies of those types of things, provide us with things that aren't those original wet initials. And also if there's something with a wet initial on it, I know exactly who to go ask. Hey, did you look at this? Because this may look a little bit off. Does that make sense?
Which we're doing now.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're just not, we weren't documenting it at this point in time.
Okay, could you explain to me, because I'm not familiar with the language, what a wet signature is?
It's just with a pen, yes, sir.
Oh.
Okay,
It's something that we can, you run your hand across, you can feel indentions, you can see it written in writing. There's kind of a lot of different ways we can dig through some of those things. But in the gist of it, what you really want to be able to do is document that review process. But it's not just documenting the invoices go out. We also want to document that we've reviewed bank reconciliations. So once a bank reconciliation is prepared, there's also things on the bank that come out electronic drafts. You never looked at an invoice for an electronic draft. So how do we know that someone's reviewing those? The way that you review it is through the bank reconciliation process.
Okay.
So it kind of covers not just the checks, but also electronic drafts and so forth. Does that make sense?
and of course, you're using the term "we." Who are we?
By we, I mean the council, whoever's performing that review process, so whoever's signing checks, whoever's reviewing the bank statements. So typically that's someone on the council who does those two processes. For the EDC, it'll be a little bit different. I think, okay, we got the president doing it, so good. Keeping Jim busy. And that was probably one of the other comments Jim was visiting about. Another just general aside comment that we did not put in writing is really related to making sure we have things signed again, but not the checks, not the invoices. It's really related to minutes, both at the EDC and the city. If y'all could please make sure y'all are signing those, so those are official documents, and we've got those signed ones of record. So, I think in a nutshell, that covered, the observations. Appreciate your questions, clarification on some of those. Like I said, we didn't consider any of those things material. We consider those just ways to better, improve our control environment and document those and take care of our staff. Any other questions on those?
Not for me. Anybody else?
But I have one more.
Yes, sir.
Talking about all of this, and we're kind of connecting the EDC with the city council.
Yes, sir.
Do you recommend that any transactions that the EDC have, that they kind of give an update to the city council, because the city council is kind of in control of that, so to speak?
So typically, the way the council governs the EDC is through the budget process.
Okay.
What the EDC will present the council with a budget, and then the council will approve the budget, and then leave the EDC to do their operations. If the EDC wants to do something outside of that budget, will then present an amended budget back to the council, so that they can then do those type of operations. But typically, y'all are giving that over to the EDC for them to operate. And that's typically how it works. So in like the day-to-day review of what's going on, y'all are giving that over to the EDC board for them to really review, for them to monitor. And and y'all monitor it through the budget process.
And can I add to that? The way the city council has run for many years is that the EDC does have a budget, but any checks that need to be written that are outside of the norm of regular business operation has to come to the council to be approved. Okay, that's the way it stands today. Now, in the future, what David said could be changed. It's just that, and right now they've got lots of cash, so we're hoping they come up with some great new projects for the city, like redoing this off building. Hint, hint. So, anyway. Any other questions? Shalina, Doug?
Just a statement, a lot of the processes that you spoke about, just to let y'all know, have been put in place. There are a few that still remain outstanding. The one thing that we found during this audit process was there was too many hands in the pie. And the reason we have missing documents, at least 3 of them that I know of, were because it wasn't a better control on the documents. And it's my butt on the line, so we're coming up with a process right now to make sure the documents are kept safe. If people need copies of them, they're all scanned, and we can get you copies of them.
Okay.
Same with the EDC.
Okay, I think that's it, David. We
Yes.
appreciate it very much.
Yes, sir. So just a quick closing remark. Like I said, I encourage you, if you have questions, reach out. Doug knows I'm pretty available. I know Shalina also knows, and Sandy over there. So I would encourage that if you have questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to visit with you. Once again, I think your staff has taken advantage of that and will continue to take advantage of it. And really, I like digging into the weeds. So anytime you want to talk, you can tell I like to talk. So appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you.
Okay, number 10, the Mayor Pro Tem report. I do want to point out that we have a special call meeting this coming Thursday on the 12th to canvass the ballots. Theoretically, supposedly, we're supposed to get the final results on the 11th. We have been advised that there's several provincial votes still sitting out there that hadn't been tallied to add to what's been completed, so there will be some changes probably to what we actually saw, come out of Henderson County after the election closed.
What time is this again?
6 o'clock. Right here. Please be here, because we've got to have a group.
You only have to have two.
Only have to have two for that?
State law says you only have to have two to canvass the vote.
Huh, I did not know that. Still, be here, please.
Yep.
On a personal note, this is my last meeting as a regular council meeting. And I want to thank the staff especially. You guys have been amazing since I've been acting. Doug, Shalina, Ryan, all you guys have just been amazing. It's been a great team. Yes, sir.
You still have to be here on the 15th, or in December.
I will be here, but I will not be running it. We will be handing the gavel over. So, don't interrupt me again. So, I do have to thank everybody that's been on the council for my last 8 years. It's been an honor, and I'll still be around. I'll be happy to help in any way. I just, I need some time. So, the city people here has just been great. So, that's all I got on the mayor's report. EDC report, you got anything?
Yes, sir. I'll address first and then Sandy. Again, I want to thank David for his attention to our operations here. We're paying attention. Thank you very much. We see a couple of areas where we can improve. We see a couple of areas where we have to change a little bit. We see a couple of areas where we have to make our stuff more transparent as to what we're doing, and also where we have to control access to what we have. One of my directions to Sandy, the treasurer here, making the monthly report to the council, is that she be sure, and it doesn't matter whether we're making a monthly report or a bi-monthly report or a quarterly report, we start off with a starting position where we began that reporting period with financially, and where we ended up with, and any significant expenditures that were done during that time period. The city council has the opportunity then to see what we're doing. They don't necessarily, it's not an approval thing, it's a how goes it, where we stand right now, and they can then address questions to us and all that. So again, I thank you very much for pointing those things out. The other thing that your report, your audit, pointed out to us is that we were ignorant of certain, both one or two of them were related to statutory requirements, one or two of them were related to generally accepted practices. Generally accepted practices, for the most part, are good to follow, because people that are looking at your organization are going to be looking to, from a standpoint of the generally accepted way, generally what they're looking for. So we thank you very much for pointing those out, and we will be taking those to heart.
One question for you, Jim.
Yes, sir.
Would you,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no problem.
My voice comes from back here.
The business center, would you give everybody an update, the status of that?
The business center, the Lake Palestine Business Center, has been sold. It has been sold to a buyer who occupied it. The paperwork is complete. The transfer is done. Okay, they've taken it over. The The sign remains city property.
Right.
Okay, we've got a long-term lease for that sign. We have control over the sign, we have electricity for the sign, etc. Okay, so that's been done. The buyer is there now and is making modifications to the facility for advertising it for rent, spaces for rent, and has a business plan in place for how he's going to use it.
Okay.
Okay?
Any update on the Family Dollar allowing access to the property on the corner?
The only access or the only update that I have is that as of earlier today, the Family Dollar elected to trespass on the property to try to assert their right over access through the new owner's property to the Family Dollar. And
Would they jump the barrier?
yes, sir.
Hmm.
But again, I don't know anything further on that at this
Okay.
point.
All right, I appreciate
Yes,
that.
sir. Go ahead.
No, he said everything.
Okay,
Do you need to get some dollar amount?
No.
well, that's in our, we'll do that.
Don't
in-
have anything.
Yeah, since y'all didn't have a meeting last time, there's no update there. Municipal court report, Joanne?
Okay, for the month of October, we had 193 new cases filed. We had 24 that were dismissed after completion of the driver's safety course, 13 after deferred disposition, 1 after proof of financial responsibility, and then 3 miscellaneous transportation code dismissals. We had 1 case that was partially satisfied by community service, 2 cases after full community service, 1 case was satisfied by jail credit, 4 cases were waived for indigency. The amount of fines and court costs waived for indigency was $1,336. We had a total fines collected for the month was $26,658. GHS, our collection company, brought in $3,928. We had in-house warrant collection of $1,699. Chris Moore cleared 5 warrants in September. That should be October, sorry. And Officer Kate served 1 arrest warrant, where the defendant was taken to jail. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, and we got an A+ on the audit for the court. So that. Okay.
Police report.
You'll note it says September 2020, this is actually October report. Calls for service were 37, agency assists was 13, traffic citations issued was 189. There was 9 total arrests. The criminal charges that were filed was 1 felony possession of controlled substance, methamphetamine. That should be 2 felony arrests, also 1 for possession of dangerous drug, 2 theft, 1 felon possession of firearm, 3 unauthorized use of motor vehicles, and 1 assault. I will tell you that there was also a theft of a firearm that occurred. Actually, there was 12 firearms that were stolen out of 1 residence, and also 1 of the unauthorized use of motor vehicle. Officer Kate and I recovered all 3 of the motor vehicles that were stolen. two of which come from within the city of Coffee City. One of them we recovered within just a few hours. One of them took us nearly a week. We also recovered two of the firearms that was stolen, and that individual is now in jail on multiple felony charges. Other things to report is on the citizen self-reporting module for CopSync. On Friday of this last week, Officer Kate completed a template of what is going to go out onto the, I guess the computer, for better lack of terms, the citizens be seeing kind of a layout of the system and choices of things that they can report over the computer to us. CopSync's telling me that once they have that information, which again was given to them last Friday, that it will take them about 5 to 7 days to implement that. They will do a final test run and we should be up and running. So hopefully by the end of this week, first part of next week, the citizen self-reporting module should be up and running complete.
Okay, and I'd like to add to the police report something I should have had under my report. All the CARE Act paperwork for the CopSync and all the stuff that the council approved, that was about $45,000 or so, has been filed with the state as of last week. So, which is over a week ahead of what it has to be. So, and Doug did the paperwork, and I came up and reviewed it all per his request, and looked very good. I don't see why there should be any questions whatsoever. They even provide a piece of paperwork somewhere that gives you all that you gotta do, right down to the details of copies of checks, of copies of contracts, so it was all there, according to the last thing, contract costs and rentals and materials and everything you gotta have. So we should be in good shape there. You know, we're dealing with states, so, and we appreciate your efforts on that, Ryan, and yours, Doug, cause it was a lot of paperwork, trust me. They don't make it easy.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
And with that being said, sir, I did not put in here about Peacemaker, who.
That was part
has
of the
the
same
hardware.
thing, that's it, part of the
Yes,
CARES
sir.
Act, so.
I've been in contact with them, several times a week, 3-4 times a week. And, the last report was on Friday, where I talked to the lady who I've been dealing with all of this. And she said that they have received about half of the equipment, that was ordered, waiting on the additional, the other half. Once that takes place, once they receive the equipment in San Marcos, then they will be scheduling with us for install into the cars.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Baker?
Just a question for the chief, please.
Yes, sir.
The citizen reporting,
Yes, sir.
is that, pardon me, will that be posted and available through the city website?
It will be attached to the city website. It's kind of a setup of its own, in a sense. There should be plenty of advertisement go out for that.
And you'll put it on the city sign also?
Yes, sir.
And
Absolutely.
Just tell us what to put,
Absolutely.
all right?
Yes, sir. You bet.
All right, thank you. Fire department report.
For the month of October in 2020, right now we're not currently under a burn ban. We had 30 calls for service, which is a little below average for us. 4 building fires, 5 grass, 13 medicals, 2 rubbish fires, 3 boat calls, 1 illegal burn, 1 MVA, and 1 to assist the police. We currently have 16 senior firefighters, and as of now, the only upcoming event we have is the holiday meal, December 12th.
Is that on?
Yes, sir, as far as I know it is. Any questions or problems, you can contact Chris Moore, fire chief.
Okay.
Not Lieutenant, Chris
There
Moore.
was one time because of the.
Yeah, as far as I know, it's still on. I have not heard different from the chief.
The only thing that would at this point, from what I talked to him about, that could derail that, is if we had a large COVID flare-up in this area.
Let's pray that doesn't happen.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Walt.
Yes, sir.
All right, item 15 on the list. We're getting down to the nitty gritty. Boys, consider an act upon DKG CPA, that would be David sitting right over there, as the city's auditor and extend his services for 2020 through 2021. So when he gets done with the current one he's working on, he'll pick right up and finish the next one.
I make a motion that upon PK to do the 2020 city auditor.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in agree? Aye. Passes unanimous. Thank you. Now I need one other motion,
I make a motion.
and I'll second that one. Got it, finally got the second and adjournment, my last trip.
Need a vote?
Oh, we got to vote. Everybody want to say yes? Aye?
Aye.
Yeah.